From the House of Sungo, this is Gaytopix, Confessions. I'm your host, Kenny Cruz, and this is my story. These are true life events that happened in my life. My voice was silenced for so long, so this videography speaks my story and tells my story. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel. These are true events. There are nothing fabricated or fake about my stories. These actually happened to me. So all rights reserved. Some viewers may find it what I'm sharing disturbing, so viewer discretion advised, but again, all rights reserved. I guess today I can talk about when I got my dog, Bill Clinton. I had come home from the military and I was a private first class at the time. And I was just finishing my first tour, but I was gone a total of 5.5 years. And as I said in a previous episode, my mother didn't know that I was actually leaving until the day I left. Because my mother didn't really essentially care anything about me. And I was writing letters because this was before cell phones and everything like that. And I wanted to come home, because we want a mass exodus. And what a mass exodus is usually around the holidays. So I'm not certain if it was Christmas or if it was Thanksgiving. But I only had a week. And I think now that I reflect on it, it was Thanksgiving. But I only had a week, and this will be my first time coming home in 5.5 years. So when I came home, I was surprised to see that no one was in the baggage claim to pick me up, considering that JFK Airport was literally right next to Far Rockaway, and my mother drove, and there was nobody there. But it didn't surprise me, given my dysfunctional family life growing up, so I got on a train with my duffel bag, and I went home, and I knocked on the door, and different people were living there. And apparently most of my family, my mother and my father at least, had passed away. And my grandmother was gravely ill. And eventually my grandfather passed away because he couldn't live without his wife of 62 years. Which is totally understandable because I'm actually suffering that type of grief right now because of the loss of my dog. I've had him 21 years, and I don't know if I can make it because I'm here all alone by myself talking to a camera. But when I came home, and I was informed by the new tenants that my mother was no longer there and she passed away and my family had gone in their separate ways. The only person I could think of was my Aunt Renee, and my Aunt Renee really wasn't my aunt, but she knew me because we lived in a shelter when we got evicted from our home, and I was 13 years old, and her son was my younger brother's best friend. So I always looked out for my younger brother, although he hasn't looked out for me at all in his lifetime. But I always looked out for him because, again, we were always searching for food and things to eat and do. He never went to school. I never went to school. Nobody in the family ever went to school. And I always looked out for him because I wanted him to live. And sometimes we would find food on the street and have to eat people's leftovers in the garbage cans and things like that. And we had to beg neighbors for food. And, we would do odd jobs just to get paid, just so we can buy food. And when we got evicted, we went into this shelter in downtown Brooklyn in the middle of Fort Greene projects. It used to be Cumberland Hospital, but it was transitioned into a shelter. And again, the environment was nothing different than what I was forced to endure as a child. I was constantly bullied and harassed and chased up and down the halls of this old hospital, and I used to hide in the staircase, in the back staircase with my girlfriend because I wanted people to stop harassing me over my sexual orientation. So I had a girlfriend, and granted, whenever I had sex with her, I thought about men, but she was, I think she knew, but was also very happy that I was with her. But there was also another reason why I was with her, was because her mother cooked and I was able to eat. So that to me was my sole purpose, and I think she understood that. Marisol, I think she understood that. So our relationship eventually faded away because she ended up cheating on me and having 5 kids with the guy she cheated on me with. But I could have never had kids with her. I would have liked to, but you know, it, I don't think it would have been possible. You know, she looked like Demi Moore in the movie Ghost. She was really like obese when I first met her, but I encouraged her to lose weight. And we worked out together, and she lost weight, and she became really sexy, and I was really proud she was my girlfriend because we were the it couple, the hot couple, at least within the shelter, and there was this guy named Blackie, and the reason why I called him Blackie was because he was so black. Like, what's that joke? He was so black, he went to night school and got marked absent. It's kind of racist now that you think about it, but back in the day, that was a common joke, and they called him Blackie, and he liked the name Blackie, so, but he was a thug and criminal and always trying to beat me up, and the security guards in the shelter were always having to protect me, and I ended up developing friendships with a bunch of them, and I remember being robbed and, things like in the laundry that was stolen, and people saying things behind my back that my girlfriend would end up having to tell me, and it was just all so difficult. But while I was with my girlfriend, my younger brother was playing with this kid named TK, and TK's mother was my Aunt Renee. She wasn't really my aunt, but she acted like she was family, and as we grew up together, and again, as I said, I met her at 13 years old in the shelter, and we lived in the shelter a year and a half, and when we moved, I was so sad that I would never see her again, or my girlfriend again, and we moved into the projects, and when we moved into the projects, I think it was maybe about a month or two later, I saw Renee on the street, and she ended up moving into the same complex that we were living in. Now, this complex was so ghetto in Far Rockaway. It's called Edgemere Projects, and it was so ghetto that random gunfire didn't affect anybody. Nobody ran, nobody was scared because it happened so often, and it was just full of projects. There was no laundromat or Dunkin' Donuts or stores or a corner store. There was nothing there but projects. And wherever you had to go to do something, you had to go to Five Towns, again, where the Burger King was, you know. So, as Renee and I, I was kind of, disappointed by the fact that she didn't know me or want to get to know me at first because I, I was, yeah, I was a little kid, but at the same time, your son is playing with my brother, so you have to at least acknowledge who I am, and eventually it took some time and she did get to know me. And now while I was watching my younger brother, she was watching her son. And she was so beautiful. She had all these fur coats and dresses and heels and handbags, and she looked like $1 million, but her whole outfit would only cost like $2.50. So whenever she would go somewhere, like she would find things to do, like ride the bus. And one of the best routes in New York City, if anyone has time, it will probably change your life. Ride the M5 bus from beginning to end. It goes along Fifth Avenue and then Riverside Drive. So you see New York City at its best. It's a beautiful architectural, historic ride. So you go from the East Village all the way up to the George Washington Bridge. It's a beautiful ride. And sometimes we would ride the bus. And TK and Dennis would play and do their thing. And sometimes we would go to Central Park and they would be playing in the park and stuff. Well, I'm now getting 14, 15 years old, trying to avoid my dysfunctional family and doing everything possible to keep my brother safe and myself safe from sexual abuse. And she understood that and allowed us to go with her and live life essentially, because again, I was always stuck in that room and I never really went anywhere. And I actually look forward to hanging out with Renee because there was always food and there was always something new to learn and something to do. So what she did was she would go shopping, and I kind of liked going shopping with her because she would never pay more than $5 for a pair of shoes, or she was wearing slips at one point, and I'm like, Renee, what are you doing? Why are you wearing slips? It's so 1950, it's like Lucy, like don't Lucille Ball, like why are you wearing slips? So I introduced her to the thong, and at first she said it was really uncomfortable, but she began to wear it and realized that slips were really of no use, and she liked the fact that I gave her advice on shopping, and so she encouraged me to go with her whenever she went shopping. We became partners in crime, and the only communication I had with people in the community was through the want ads. Here I am as a gay child, a gay teenager, growing up. I could not use the phone. I didn't have any friends. No friends could come over to my house. The only people I had were Renee and my manager. And my manager at McDonald's was sexually abusing me. And Renee actually listened to me. And I didn't tell her about my manager because, again, I tried to tell everybody about my stepfather molesting me, and no one listened. So what was the point of saying that my manager did anything to me? Especially when I was actually engaging in it myself. I actually began to like it, and wanted more of it. So I thought we were actually dating, and Uncle Juan was my boyfriend. And so Renee and I would sit in a park on the bench while TK and Dennis would play. And as we're sitting in the park, we would read want ads in the Village Voice and other free newspapers. And as I said, it was my only communication with people in the LGBTQ community. So I would create ads. I'm not sure how I got away with it, but being a kid, but I did. So I created these ads, and every time we would read the want ads, you would see the escort ads and the massage therapists and all that, and then the actual want ads. And we would read them, and I was hoping that and praying that she would actually see my ad and ask me what's this about. But I never told her about my sexual orientation or anything like that because of the way she spoke of gay people, and people who were gay, and how it was an abomination of Christ and God. And I was like, oh God, if she finds out that I'm gay, that's the end of my relationship with her. But I also gave her subtle hints, like I said, with the ads, and hoping that she would actually read one of the ads and know that it was mine. But she didn't. She never realized it. And eventually, I think she did find out because when I came home after my parents had died, and I came home, she was the only one that I knew I could go to. But when I went to her house and I knocked on her door, I can hear them inside. I can even hear my little brother inside. And no one opened the door. No one opened the door. I was, like I said, I was gone for a week, so I went back every day while sleeping on the subway, riding the subway all night long, sleeping because I had no place to go. And I went back every single day, every single day. And for 5 days, and she never answered the door. And I went back into the military and served another 3 years in Iraq. And when I came home, I was homeless. And I had no place to go. And I knew I wasn't invited to Renee's house. And it kind of disturbed me. She eventually started speaking to me, but only by phone. I couldn't hang out with her, I couldn't see her, I couldn't do anything. It was always by phone. And so sometimes we would be on the phone for hours, and other times we'd be on the phone very short periods of time. But eventually that stopped, and I never got actual reason. In fact, I actually have text messages asking her what the problem is. Sometimes she would talk to me and she would put the phone down and go in another room and do other things in another room. And I can hear her shuffling and doing other things, while she's on the phone with me. And I'm asking questions, but she's not responding, so I know she's not actually there on the phone. There are other times she purposely hung up the phone. There are other times she didn't want to answer the phone. So eventually it stopped, and I didn't understand why. Like I said, I knew her when I was 13. Now I'm 30 years old. 30 years old. So all this time you knew me, but yet you just stopped communicating with me out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. What happened? Maybe she found out that I was gay, but she did, because I ended up eventually telling her that I was gay. In fact, I introduced her to this guy I was talking to. I spoke of him in a previous episode where I don't want to use his name because of legal rights, but we'll just call him D. I introduced her to D, and they developed a very good friendship. Now, to me, it seemed like she was more accepting of D than she was of me because of her actions toward me. But I couldn't understand this because you knew me since I was a child. You're now a grandmother, and I'm 30 years old. 2 years I came home, and you act like you don't know me. In that time, I adopted a dog, and I named him Bill Clinton because my superiors suggested it will help with the PTSD, and I named him Bill Clinton because Bill Clinton was my commander-in-chief when I served. And seeing that the military was suggesting it, I thought it was a perfect name and a perfect match for him. And Bill Clinton lived on for 21 years. But within that 21 years, he was my only family. He was my only friend because I found myself, I don't have any friends. I am unemployed. I was homeless. I don't have an education because the education I got in the military as a sergeant, you know, was not recognized here in civilian life. And I was essentially lost and I had nowhere to go. And Bill Clinton was the only family, the only thing I knew that consisted of love, and the only thing that loved me back. And as an adult man, you know, it's just, I was 28 when I came out from the military. I'm now 49, and I can't believe in all that time that I was famous as Poppy Sungo, and all that time that I was in the prime of my life, and not one person liked me, or wanted me, or wanted to hang around me. Because, it was the phone line. You would call the phone line, somebody would think my voice was too feminine, and then not connect with me. Then there was times that I would meet people off the phone line, and I would be standing on a corner waiting and waiting and waiting, and just get stood up. Then there are other times where I go on an actual date, and they never return. Like, there's a movie with Marlon Wayans once. I think it was The $6 Million Man, and it was with Marlon Wayans, and we went on a date, and the guy said he was going to a bathroom, and he never returned. There's another time I went on a date, and we sat in a restaurant, and we ordered food, and we were discussing politics, and I don't consider myself Democrat or Republican. I'm both. Like, I'm independent. There are several things that I like that Democrats do, and there's several things that Republicans do that I like. Well, I'm from the military, so we see things on a different level than what normal Democrats and normal Republicans see. And so I try to balance things out. More so, that's what I do because I'm a Libra. So I try to find harmony and balance in everything. At the time, George W. Bush was running, and there were some things that he was saying that I liked. I think there was something about immigration and infrastructure or something of that nature that I really liked. Excuse me. And the guy that I was talking to over dinner, waiting for the food to come, asked me who I was voting for, and I said George Bush. He had a look of like shock in his face, like, how could you? You live in New York City. This is a Democratic state. I'm like, so I have every right to vote who I want to vote for. And he said he'll be right back, and he never came back. I thought he was going to the bathroom, but he never came back. And the food arrived, and the waiter was like, where's your friend? After about 10 minutes, me sitting there by myself. So he ended up leaving me with the bill, and just by myself in a restaurant full of people, and it was very embarrassing. Very embarrassing. Then, when I do meet people, like I said, if things went well, it's very hard for me to talk about this because it's been going on for so long. There are other times when I meet people and things went well and we engaged in sexual activity, but I would never see them again. I would never see these people again. And I didn't understand that. If sex was so good, why is it that I never saw you again? Then there were actual people who I actually talked to, and I ended up meeting a guy on the phone line, and we met, and we went on a first date to this Nuyorican cafe. I'm not sure if it's still there in the East Village, but it was something that I really, like, it was one of the best dates I've ever been on, and I've never seen anything like that because it's very artistic, and very liberal and free speech. I was like, wow, these people, these words are powerful, from the poets that were reciting their poems. And I was so happy. And I remember us leaving the cafe, and it was a bar cafe. And he put me in a shopping cart. And he pushed me down the street in a shopping cart, and I crashed into, you know, a fence, and I fell out the shopping cart, and he picked me up, and everything was fine, and we started to date, and I was actually very happy for the first time in a very long time, and we dated for about 6 months, and I used protection, and I always used protection, but he told me one day if I loved him, I wouldn't need he wouldn't need to put on a condom, and we can do it raw. And I was still concerned, but yet I wanted to prove my love to him. And we had raw sex, and after he finished nutting inside me, he said to me, "Now you're going to know what it feels like to be in pain." I never understood that, but as you see, those words are embedded in my head. Now you know what it feels like to be in pain. What does that mean? And I asked him what that meant, and why would you say that at this time? He never gave me an answer. He just rolled over and went to sleep, and that was it. I think it was a couple months later, on Christmas Eve, 2005, the very year that I came home and living in the shelter. Christmas Eve 2005, I got violently sick. I couldn't get out of bed. I was having night sweats and coughing, and it was horrible. I didn't understand where I got this from, and what happened, and how I got so sick. But what made it so weird was that, and awkward, was the very next day I woke up as if nothing happened, which was Christmas Day. Actually, it was the day before Christmas Eve. And then Christmas Eve, that's when I woke up, everything was fine. But I still wanted to find out what was going on, and I had enough energy to go to the doctor. So I went to Callan Lord, which is a LGBTQ healthcare center here in New York City. And a doctor comes in and wants to have a conversation with me. And it's Christmas Eve, and I'm like, why are they here? Shouldn't they all want to be going home to their families, And she said she had something very disturbing to tell me, and told me I tested positive for HIV. Now, I knew who did it, so I had him arrested, and we went to court. But at that time, gay marriage was not legal. Gay marriage or anything gay was not even recognized. So when he was arrested, he was immediately released on his own recognizance. And I remember there was a story of a man around that same time, actually, who, in upstate New York, he was having sex with all these different women unprotected, and giving them HIV and transmitting HIV to them because a woman did it to him. So out of revenge, he started to do it to all these women. This is a very big story, so it's famous, and I don't know his name. I can't recollect his name, but it actually did happen. So I thought perhaps the same thing would happen, and he would be arrested for attempted murder, essentially, because he gave me a death sentence by infecting me. And he wasn't even charged with harassment. They released him on his own recognizance. When we got to court, the judge just basically threw it out and gave me a lifetime order of protection, and that was it. He never served any jail time. He never did any he was never held accountable for what he did to me. But apparently, he had it for 13 years before I found out. So when we started to date and have sex, he already had it. He already had it and was engaging in sexual activity with me and purposely infected me when he said, now you know what it's going to feel like to be in pain. Then that became a problem because I couldn't tell people that I was HIV because then there's stigma with the HIV and then there's stigma with being gay. So you see where I'm going with this is that throughout my entire life, I have been closeted and I could not come out. I was sexually abused as a child. I was sexually abused as a teenager. I was served in the army when it was don't ask, don't tell. I couldn't actually come out of the closet and say I'm gay, to family because they essentially disowned me and I had no family. I had no friends because people, even employers, would, once they found out that I was gay, which in some instances I actually thought it would be beneficial to their company, but once they found out I was gay, they denied me the opportunity to be employed, and I could never get the job. And as I said, there was at one time with Continental Airlines, and then it was United Airlines, and there was British Airways and U.S. Airways, and there wasn't an airline I didn't apply to, and I interviewed, but I was never hired. The police didn't hire me, and I firmly believe to this day the reason why I was not hired was because of the things that my therapist wrote about me being gay. And she didn't understand, because again, this is before gay marriage and before everyone actually accepted people who were gay in the LGBTQ community. So there was always that stigma and people wanting to avoid us and people having these misconstrued thoughts of who we are and that we were mentally imbalanced because we were gay, and the notes that she wrote were literally copied and pasted from a book, and I knew then I couldn't get into the NYPD. And because she referenced the fact that I was homosexual over and over and over again, which is really irrelevant because all you had to do was really say it one time. But she kept saying it over and over and over again, making me look like a bad person. That's one of the things I have a problem with therapy is that when you go to a therapist, sometimes the therapists need therapy themselves. And sometimes the therapist is not as bright as you think they are. Like a doctor. All doctors learn the same thing while they're in their residencies. They all learn the body. No matter what field they're in, they still know everything about the body. But because they're in a certain field, they don't want to address certain issues that don't relate to the field that they're working in. So with therapy, because the person has the degree and the title, more than likely, and it's happened to me often because I've seen over 200 therapists and counselors and things like that, they're likely to side with the therapist because they have the degree and the title. They may be wrong, and in most cases they are wrong, but people are likely to believe their side of the story because they have the experience and the degree. Now, with doctors, I know my body. I know when something is wrong with my body. I don't care how many degrees or how many residents and how long you've been in school. I know my body, and when I tell you something is wrong, something is wrong. And oftentimes I'm ignored, and it was the same thing with therapy, so I never found therapy to be very helpful or useful. Again, these are all mental health related issues, but I don't think there's anything wrong with me mentally. I just think I've suffered a lot in my lifetime, and I don't have the closure to move past it. And this is the reason why I'm doing this videography, because this will serve as my voice. Because no one actually ever listened, and when they did listen, they didn't do anything. So perhaps one day when I'm gone, people will see this and, you know, hear my story. Wow. I'm trying my best because I have to focus and maintain myself on camera. But it's hard to share these stories because they've changed my life. They made me broken. They made me who I am today. I miss my Aunt Renee tremendously. My brother was even his best friend TK's best man at the wedding that I wasn't invited to. It's just, I miss her tremendously, and I to this day I don't know why she disappeared, but perhaps it was meant to be without you. And again, I was accustomed to people reacting this way and doing things this way, so it didn't surprise me that she stopped communicating with me. But again, it left me alone in a room by myself. But I had my dog Bill Clinton, and now Bill Clinton is dead. I am truly alone for the first time in my life. And I'm 50 years old. 50 years old, and I'm by myself. By myself. How can I be 50 years old and never been in a relationship? How can I be 50 and never been in a relationship? Am I not worthy of love? I'm beginning to think that because all my life it's been like that, where people pretended to love me, but in actuality they were doing things to me that were not legal. It was abuse. So you can't say abuse is love. I don't want to say abuse is love, but it's the only love I've ever had. Damn it. I have to cut it here. I have to cut it here. Again, this is Gaytopix Confessions. These are true stories. These are actual life events that happened to me. All rights reserved. Remember, you're always in the mix with Gaytopix. I'm your host, Kenny Cruz. I'll see you later.